Figure it out yourself." "Mom, it's not my problem." That's what my own daughter said before hanging up on me. The sound of the disconnect tone was louder than any scream I'd ever heard. I sat there at my kitchen table, staring at the phone, my fingers still trembling. My name is Marjorie Elwood. I'm 68 years old. And 3 weeks ago I won $338 million in the lottery and told no one. But what they didn't know was, this call wasn't a cry for help. It was a test. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. It was a test. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about money, it's about truth. The kind that doesn't glitter, doesn't smile for photos, and doesn't forgive easily. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Maybe that's the accountant in me, trained to notice the little discrepancies, the quiet numbers that don't add up. I've always believed that people reveal who they really are when they think no one's watching. I kept ledgers that balanced to the cent. I could tell you the exact day a shipyard ran at a loss, or when a supervisor snuck an extra zero into an invoice. But no spreadsheet ever prepared me for the mess of family love. For 40 years, sharp enough to sting your throat, Baltimore's harbor air has a taste, salt, and diesel. My thermos of instant coffee in one hand and my lunch bag in the other. We wore hard hats back then, even in accounting. I used to breathe that air every morning walking to the shipyard office. The men called me Numbers Lady. I took it as a compliment. They'd forget, though, that while they built ships, because the ceiling leaked whenever it rained, mortgage payments, a life they'd one day take for granted, I was building futures college funds. Paul. There. I met my husband, the kind who came home smelling of iron and smoke. He was a welder. When he died 10 years ago from a heart attack, he was a welder. But then Ethan and Chloe needed me, or so I believed. We built our small house just outside the harbor district, a modest one-story with creaking floors and a lemon tree out back. He spoke in numbers too, but his were colder, the kind you use to impress clients, not feed a family. He'd grown up watching me stretch a dollar until it begged for mercy. I thought the silence would kill me next. "Mom," he'd say. Ethan was always the polished one. "You have to let your money work for you." I never told him my money had already worked. It put him through college when his scholarships didn't cover enough, paid off his car loan when interest ballooned. Yet he acted like thrift was a disease. Chloe was softer on the outside, at least. Yet he acted like thrift was a disease. You can't just hoard cash forever. The kind that made people think she was kind too. And covered his wedding catering because his ego couldn't handle a backyard ceremony. She had her moments. Though after her divorce, she came home for a while. Boxes stacked in my living room. Makeup streaked down her face. She inherited my husband's eyes, telling her everything would be fine. A month later, but kindness isn't crying when you want something, it's showing up when someone else needs you. I never complained. Mothers don't. Not out loud. We just keep receipts, not the paper kind. But the emotional ones. I stayed up every night cooking soup. The birthdays forgotten because work got crazy. The subtle jokes at dinner about old-fashioned thinking. She moved out and told her friends she'd managed to get back on her feet, never mentioning that her rent was prepaid by her old mother's pension. Line by line. Like an unbalanced ledger. I still remember last Christmas. My house was decorated the way Paul used to love its silver lights. A small tree with our initials carved into the wooden star on top. Ethan brought a bottle of expensive wine and spent half the evening on his phone. Chloe complained that the ham was too salty and that I should really consider selling the house since keeping up a property this size isn't good for someone your age. Then, between sips of wine, she laughed and said, "Well, at least we'll have a good inheritance when you're gone." Mom. She didn't mean it as a joke. Her brother laughed anyway. I smiled. But something cold settled inside me that night, the quiet knowledge that love in my family had an expiration date. When the Mega Millions drawing came on the news, I wasn't even paying attention. The numbers scrolled across the screen like they always did. White balls under bright lights. 5, 17, 29, 41, 46, and the mega ball 11. I almost spilled my coffee when I looked at the ticket magneted to my fridge. Those were my numbers, the same ones I'd been playing every week for 15 years. Paul's birthday, our anniversary, and Liam's birth date. I stared at them until my eyes blurred. It's strange how quiet a miracle can feel. No fireworks. No shouting. Just my heart hammering in my chest and the hum of the refrigerator. I sat down at the kitchen table and whispered, "Paul, would you look at that?" The ticket was worth $338 million. After taxes, around 210. More money than I could ever spend. More money than my children could imagine. But I didn't tell a soul. That same night, I made a cup of chamomile tea and opened my ledger, not to balance numbers this time, but to balance truth. I wrote down everything I'd given my children over the years. Loans, gifts, tuition, emergencies. By midnight, the total was $64,000 and change. I stared at that number until the ink bled through the page. And I realized something. They owed me far more than money. Over the next few days, I did what I'd always done best planned. I found a lawyer. Dr. Anika Shah. A woman young enough to be my daughter, but sharp enough to make seasoned bankers nervous. "You want a trust that can't be contested?" she asked, sliding a legal pad across the table. "Not just can't. Sliding a legal pad across the table." I said, "No loopholes. No pity clauses." She smiled, a little amused. "You've thought this through." I nodded. "I've had 68 years of practice. We met 3 times in total. I signed papers that would later make national headlines under the quiet name Red Harbor Trust. While Dr. Shah drafted documents, I visited a private investigator, Calvin Rhodes, a retired detective with the patience of a saint and the moral compass of a hawk. "You're hiring me to watch your own kids?" he asked. "Not watch," I corrected. "Document. I want to know how they live when no one's watching." He raised an eyebrow. "Planning something big?" "Ms. Elwood." I smiled. "Let's just say I'm running an audit." For 3 weeks, my life was a performance. I still clipped coupons, walked to the diner for coffee with Hal Dorsey, and grumbled about rising utility bills. When Ethan called, I mentioned my tight budget. When Chloe texted, I answered politely but never hinted at the fortune sitting in my newly opened accounts. And when Liam, sweet Liam, called to ask how my garden was doing, I told him about the dahlias and the old lemon tree that refused to die, never once suspecting he was about to become my only true heir. But it wasn't enough to know. I needed proof, the kind that spoke louder than tears or excuses. So, I devised a test. 1 phone call. 1 simple request. A few $100s for my heart medication until my next Social Security deposit. It wasn't even a lie. I did take heart pills. What I wanted to know was who would answer. I practiced the conversation in my head for days, rehearsing the tone of helplessness that old people are expected to use. I hated it, but it had to sound real. "Ethan." I imagined myself saying, "I hate to ask," but the medication went up again. Just until next month. I already knew his answer. And I wasn't wrong. When I finally made that first call, it was early evening, the kind of hour when daylight still clings to the window panes, pretending it isn't fading. I sat in my kitchen, same table, Same chair Paul used to sand every spring, and dialed Ethan's number. He answered on the third ring. Mom. Same chair Paul used to sand every spring, and dialed Ethan's number. Sounding distracted. The background noise of clinking glasses and low chatter betraying he was still at work. Is everything okay? I swallowed hard, forcing a tremble into my voice. I hate to bother you, honey, but the pharmacy just raised the price of my heart medication. I'm a little short this month. Could you help me? Maybe just a few hundred until next check. There was a pause, not long, but long enough to hurt. Then that voice, calm, managerial, distant. Mom, you really need to start budgeting better. You can't keep running to us for every little thing. Running to us. As if I'd ever leaned on him a day in my life. I'm not, I began. But he cut me off. No. Listen. I mean this kindly. You're retired now. You've got to live within your means. Maybe sell the house and move somewhere smaller. Assisted living might actually make things easier. Assisted living. That's what he called it. I could almost hear his smirk through the line. Polite. Professional. Utterly cruel. I'll think about it, I said softly, gripping the receiver so hard my knuckles turned white. He sighed, like I was a burden interrupting his productivity. Do that. I'll send you a link to some places I've researched. And then, just before hanging up, he added, I can't keep enabling this. Mom. Enabling. The same woman who worked double shifts so he could graduate debt-free was apparently an addict, now addicted to asking for love. The next morning, I called Chloe. She answered on speaker, her voice echoing through what sounded like a cafe. Hey, Mom. I'm in between meetings. Can we make this quick? I'll try, I said. The doctor changed my prescription, and it's expensive. I just need a little help until... Oh my God. Mom, she groaned. You're exaggerating again. You always make everything sound dramatic. I'm not. It's not my problem, she snapped, cutting me off. You should have planned better. You can't expect me to just hand you money every time you get stressed. Every time. This was the first time I had ever asked her for help. But in her mind, that didn't matter. I'd asked once, and once was too much. Her voice softened then, but not with empathy. With condescension. Look, Mom, I love you. But you have to be realistic. I can't keep bailing you out. Maybe you should talk to Ethan. He's good with money. I bit down on my tongue so hard I tasted iron. Of course, I said, steady as glass. Take care. Sweetheart. The line clicked dead. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the microwave door. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, they all seemed to fade. And then, for reasons I still can't explain, I smiled. Because now I knew, when you spend your life saving others, there's a strange freedom in realizing no one's coming to save you. Later that day, I called Liam. My sweet boy. He answered on the second ring, his voice bright and unguarded. Grandma. Hey. What's up? Hi. Honey, I said, trying to keep my tone light. I hate to bother you, but I've had some unexpected medical costs. The heart medication's gone up again. And, before I could even finish, he interrupted, but not with anger. With concern. Wait. Are you okay? How much do you need? I can drive down this weekend. My throat tightened. Oh. Sweetheart. You don't have to. Of course I do. He said, you've done everything for me. If you need help, I'll figure it out. I've got maybe 600 saved. But if it's more, I can sell my guitar. "Are you sure you're okay?" That broke me. "Are you sure you're okay?" Not the offer. The reflex of love that didn't stop to calculate. Tears blurred the numbers on my kitchen calendar. "I'm fine." "Honey." "Really?" "You just focus on school." "Grandma," he said gently. "Money's just money. You're my family." After we hung up, I sat in silence, staring at the phone like it might ring again. But it didn't. Only the sound of the clock. I sat in silence. Over the next few days, Calvin Rhodes's reports started arriving, neatly typed, bound, and brutal. Ethan had accessed private banking databases multiple times, even pulled my old mortgage record. Chloe had been gossiping at work, claiming I was showing signs of dementia. One of her coworkers recorded it on her phone. I printed everything out and placed the files in my ledger, labeling them in red ink. Evidence. It felt like accounting again. Only this time the audit was personal. The irony wasn't lost on me all those years, warning my clients that numbers never lie. And here I was, using them to measure betrayal. On the third Sunday, the leaves outside had begun to turn. Baltimore in autumn glows like forgiveness golden, soft, deceptive. I sat by the window with a cup of tea and reread Liam's last text. "Just checking on you. Did you get your prescription filled? Love you. No agenda. No guilt. Just love." That's when I decided it was time. I called Dr. Shah and said, "Let's finalize everything. The trust, the recording, all of it." She didn't ask why. Smart woman. By Friday, every paper was signed, notarized, and filed. By Friday, it was structured with a no-contest clause so strong it could make a shark lawyer choke. Still, I wasn't done. Revenge wasn't the goal. Accountability was. I wanted Ethan and Chloe to face themselves, not just the money they lost, but the mirror I was about to hold up. That night, I called Hal Dorsey. The Red Harbor Trust was officially active, naming Liam Dane as sole beneficiary, my old neighbor. I said, "How would you like to wash one more car?" He chuckled through the line. "For you, Marge, always." "What are we cleaning?" "A little gift," I said. "For someone who still remembers what family means." When he came by the next morning, he whistled low at the silver sedan parked in my driveway. "She's a beauty," he said, running a hand over the hood. "Who's the lucky one?" "My grandson," I said, smiling faintly. He passed a test he didn't even know he was taking. Hal looked at me for a long second, then nodded. "Good for you, Marge. About time you stopped grading on a curve." As he turned the hose on, the morning sun hit the water just right, scattering little rainbows across the car's surface. I stood there watching, thinking how strange it was that truth could look beautiful even when it hurt like hell. Scattering little rainbows across the car's surface. 3 weeks. 3 answers. That's all it took to know who still had a heart. What my children didn't realize was that I'd already forgiven them, just not in the way they'd hoped. Because love without respect isn't love at all. It's charity. And I'd spent my whole life giving enough of that. I closed my ledger that night, drew a line under the last entry, and wrote 4 words that would define everything to come. Final audit. Complete. The Monday after I finished my final audit, the storm began to brew quiet, invisible, the kind that starts with whispers. It started at Ethan's bank. Calvin Rhodes, my private investigator, had warned me. Once he figures out something's off, he'll start digging, he said. And he was right. Within 2 days, Ethan had accessed 3 internal databases, all unauthorized. He wasn't even subtle about it. He searched for my name, my accounts, my mortgage history. The logs were time-stamped, his initials attached. At the same time, Chloe was unraveling in her own way. One of Calvin's recordings captured her lunch with a coworker at a PR cafe called Lux and Latte. She laughed, loud and careless, over a cappuccino. "Mom's losing it," she said. "Keeps talking about her old lottery numbers like they mean something. I swear she's slipping." The coworker, bless her curious heart, was recording content for her vlog that day. The clip went viral in their little office group chat. I didn't even have to lift a finger, their own mouths were burying them. Hal, my neighbor, dropped by that Wednesday morning with his usual cup of diner coffee. "Marge," he said, leaning against my fence, "your daughter was at the hardware store yesterday, talking about you needing supervision." I pretended not to hear. "Supervision," I repeated, rolling the word around like spoiled milk. He nodded grimly. "Said she's worried about your mental state. Mentioned something about guardianship paperwork." Guardianship. That was a word that could gut a person. It meant giving up control of your life, your bank account, to your home. It meant giving up control of your life, your bank account, your freedom. I'd seen it happen to old women in my church group, and suddenly they couldn't sign their own checks. I smiled, though my jaw ached from it. "Let them try," I said. That afternoon, Calvin called. "You're not going to like this," he began. "Ethan's friend at the bank, a guy named Trent, overheard him speculating about you hitting it big. Something about sudden, large transfers. Legal consultations. It's getting around." I sighed. "How bad?" "Well, Trent made a few jokes. But one of the senior managers overheard, there's going to be an internal review." I could almost picture Ethan's face when compliance called him in. The perfect son. The professional. Being questioned about snooping through his mother's finances. Poetic justice had excellent timing. That night, I sat in my living room with a single lamp on. The rest of the house in darkness. The clock ticked louder than usual. The rest of the house in darkness. The clock ticked louder than usual. Blue for verbal abuse. Yellow for emotional neglect. I wanted the story of my life to be filed neatly, indisputably. Somewhere between the pages, I found a photo of Ethan at 12 front teeth missing, grinning beside the model ship we'd built together. He'd wanted to call it Freedom's Light. I stared at that boy's face and wondered when the man replaced him. By Friday, the gossip had fully turned on itself. Ethan's bank issued a statement of suspension pending review. Chloe's firm had quietly pulled her from a campaign after the video leak. She called me that evening, her voice brittle but polite. "Mom, people are saying things. About me. About Ethan. Did you talk to anyone?" "I've been home all week," I said truthfully. Then how she stopped. I said truthfully. "Never mind." Exhaled. "They do," I agreed softly. "But sometimes stories twist themselves." "Mom, please," she said, suddenly small. "We need to talk. As a family." A family. Funny how that word only shows up when there's something to lose. I told her we'd talk Sunday. "Dinner at my house." She agreed instantly, relief rushing through the phone. After she hung up, I stood by the kitchen window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. I could see my reflection in the glass older, sharper, maybe even colder than I remembered. "Paul," I whispered to the empty room, "I'm about to balance the books." Sunday crept in like a quiet storm slow, gray and heavy. The kind of day that feels too still, like the air itself is waiting for something to break. I spent the morning cleaning, not because I had to, but because it steadied me, polishing surfaces, Aligning silverware, it gave me rhythm, control. The smell of lemon polish mixed with coffee hung in the air. By 5 o'clock, the house was spotless. I set the table for 4 white plates. My mother's crystal glasses. Cloth napkins folded just so. There was a roast in the oven. Potatoes turning golden. And a faint hiss from the kettle on the stove. The domestic quietness of it almost fooled me into thinking this was a normal Sunday dinner. Almost. At 5:30, the first car pulled into the driveway. Ethan's sleek black sedan, predictable. Spotless. Cold. He walked in without knocking, the way men do when they believe every room belongs to them. "Smells good. Mom," he said, taking off his coat. "Guess you're still managing okay?" I smiled. "I do my best." He looked around, eyes sharp. "You've done some upgrades. New TV. Different curtains." I shrugged. "Just rearranged a few things." "Right," he said slowly, the suspicion in his tone poorly disguised. At 5:40, Chloe arrived. Perfume first, attitude second. She hugged me tight, too tight, her voice pitched sweet. "Mom, you look great. I've missed this." Her hands lingered on my arms, squeezing like she was testing for weakness. I patted her cheek. "Dinner's almost ready. Why don't you help me bring the salad out?" She followed me into the kitchen, glancing at every counter. "Still cooking yourself? You should hire someone. You can't be doing all this alone." I handed her the salad bowl. "I manage." Ethan poured himself wine without asking, leaning against the counter like he owned the place. "So," he said, swirling the glass. "What's this about? You sounded serious on the phone." I wiped my hands on a towel and faced them. "I just wanted a nice family dinner. It's been too long." Chloe smiled nervously. "You're not mad about that phone call, are you?" "What phone call?" I asked, tilting my head. "The one," she faltered. "When I said you were exaggerating." "Oh, that," I said lightly. "Water under the bridge." Ethan glanced between us. Tense. "Good. Because things have been complicated at work. Someone spread rumors that I accessed confidential data. It's ridiculous. Rumors can be cruel," I said, turning the roast. "But sometimes they come from truth." He stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. 3 chimes, steady and clear. Liam's voice called, "Grandma, it's me." When he stepped in, the room changed lighter, cleaner, like oxygen returning. He brought a small bouquet of wildflowers and placed them in a jar on the table. "Thought you'd like these," he said. "Perfect." I smiled. "They match the roast." He laughed, pulling out a chair. Chloe's eyes flicked to the keys in his hand, the gleam of a new car key fob. "Liam," she said, sharp as a knife. "Where'd you get that?" "Oh," he said, suddenly unsure. "Grandma helped me fix up her old sedan. Said it was time I had something reliable." Her face paled. "You gave him a car?" Ethan chuckled darkly. "Guess the budgeting issues aren't that bad after all." I didn't look up. "Sit down," I said quietly. The table fell silent except for the tick of the clock and the slow pour of wine. For a while, we ate in fragile peace. Then Chloe couldn't help herself. "Mom," she said carefully, "we just want to make sure you're safe. We heard you've been meeting with lawyers." Ethan added, "Yeah. And some investigator." "What's that about?" I dabbed my lips with a napkin. "I like to be thorough. Old habits." "Thorough about what?" Ethan pressed. The future, I said simply. Mine. And the family's. He leaned forward, his voice low. If this is about the money, Mom, you need to tell us. People are talking. We could help manage it before it gets messy. I met his gaze. Calm and unblinking. Messy. He hesitated. I mean, if you've come into something, you need guidance. You're not. Not what? He faltered, the words dying in his throat. Across the table, Chloe reached for her wine, her hand trembling just enough to spill a drop. It stained the white tablecloth a red bloom spreading slowly. Quietly. Unstoppable. I stared at it for a moment, then smiled faintly. Don't worry about the mess, I said. It'll all be cleaned up soon. They didn't understand what I meant. Not yet. But they would. That night wasn't the confrontation, not yet. That would come later, when truth was no longer optional. But it was the first crack in the foundation, the one that made the whole house start to shift. When they left, I stood by the window, watching their taillights fade into the fog. Liam hugged me before getting into his car. Dinner was great. Grandma, he said softly. You okay? I nodded. I'm better than I've been in years. He smiled. Trusting. Innocent. See you next week. Oh, yes, I said, my voice calm as the tide. Next week will be unforgettable. And it would be, I said, the next Sunday. The air was sharp enough to taste. The kind of cold that seeps through old windows and sits in your bones. I woke before dawn, brewed my coffee, and set the house for what would be the final act. Because the truth, just like the sea, always rises eventually. No music. No candles. Low. Just the sound of the furnace humming under the floorboards steady. By 6 that evening, the stage was ready. My kitchen light cast long shadows across the living room. Inevitable. To report. And transcript neatly stacked. Pooling over the files on my desk, every receipt. At 6:15, Chloe arrived first. I poured myself a glass of tea and waited. Mom, she said, breathless, coat half on. You wouldn't believe the week I've had. The agency put me on leave because of that stupid video. I don't even know who recorded it. I do, I said softly. Her mouth froze mid-word. What? The video from Lux and Latte. I continued, eyes still on my teacup. It was public. But Calvin made sure I got a copy before your PR team could scrub it. Her color drained. You hired a private investigator. Yes, I said, looking up now. After all, if my own children think I'm senile, I thought I should double-check who's telling the truth. Before she could answer, Ethan's sedan pulled into the driveway. His door slammed harder than necessary. When he entered, the air seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Mom, he said tightly, we need to talk. Now. Perfect timing, I said. Dinner's ready. He blinked. Dinner. Yes, I said, motioning toward the table, 4 plates again. I like symmetry. Chloe hovered near the counter, restless. Ethan refused to sit. Let's not play games. I know what's going on. Someone at the bank reported that I accessed your files. You must have said something. Let's not play games. I didn't say anything. I simply kept records. He frowned. Records. I rose slowly and walked to my desk. Every call, every message, every transaction. I'm an accountant. Ethan, you think I'd forget how to balance a ledger? The room went silent, except for the faint hiss of the oven cooling down. Then a knock at the door. 3 precise taps. Liam stepped in, carrying a manila envelope and a hesitant smile. "Hey, Grandma. Doctor Shah said you needed me to drop this off. Perfect timing." "Sweetheart," I said. "Come in." He entered, looking between his mother and uncle. The tension hit him instantly. "Should I?" "No," I said gently. "Stay. You deserve to see this." Ethan crossed his arms. "What the hell is this?" "Mom." I set the envelope on the table. "This," I said, "is the truth. From inside." I pulled out the first document, a framed lottery ticket, preserved behind glass. Chloe gasped. "No way." Ethan's mouth fell open. "That's—" "Yes," I interrupted. 3 weeks ago, those numbers bought me $210 million after taxes. And before you start, it's already claimed, invested, and protected." They stared at me as if I'd spoken in tongues. "You're lying," Ethan said finally. I smiled cold, slow, unhurried. "I don't lie. I document." Chloe's hands shook. "Mom, we didn't know if we'd known. That's the point." I cut in. "You would have helped me if you'd known. But love shouldn't depend on a balance sheet." Ethan stepped forward, voice rising. "You tested us, manipulated us like lab rats." "No," I said evenly. "I gave you both an opportunity to show who you already were." I handed Liam the second envelope. "Read this, sweetheart." He unfolded it carefully. "Red Harbor Trust," he read aloud. "Established October Deeth. Liantenling Arshawu. Beneficiary, Liam Dane." Chloe blinked. "What?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Every cent. Every property. Every bond. All under a no-contest clause. You challenge it, you get nothing." Ethan slammed his hand on the table. "This is insane. You're not thinking clearly." "Oh, I'm thinking clearer than I ever have," I said, my voice cutting through the room like glass. "You tried to have me declared incompetent. You filed preliminary guardianship forms with your lawyer. Ethan, don't deny it, I have the copies." His face blanched. "How?" "Calvin found them." I said. "You weren't as discreet as you thought." Chloe whispered. "Oh my God." I turned to her. "And you, dear, told people I was slipping. You mocked me in public. That video cost you your job, but it saved me the trouble of explaining your character." "Mom, please," she started, but her voice broke. "No," I said firmly. "You wanted to be the PR expert. Consider this your lesson in optics." Liam looked between us, uneasy. "Grandma, are you sure you want to do this?" "Yes," I said softly, "because this isn't revenge. It's math. Actions have value and so does silence. You both chose yours." Ethan leaned on the table, face red, voice trembling with fury, face red. "So what?" Handing everything to a kid. I looked at him with something like pity. To a man who offered everything he had when I had nothing. A boy who called to ask if I was okay, not what I could give him. Chloe wiped her eyes. Mascara streaking. "We made mistakes," I said softly. "But you're punishing us for one bad week." "One bad week," I laughed. But there was no joy in it. Try a lifetime. Every time I was dismissed, belittled, patronized, "This is just the receipt coming due." The silence after that felt bottomless. Finally, I opened the last folder. "For what it's worth," I said quietly, "I forgive you both. But forgiveness doesn't mean entitlement." They said nothing. I opened the last folder. Somewhere outside, a dog barked one sharp, lonely sound. I turned to Liam, who was still clutching the papers. "Sweetheart, would you help me hang this?" He blinked. I opened the last folder. "The ticket," I said. "Right there. Let it remind everyone who walks through that door what honesty looks like," I said. I opened the last folder. "Yes, ma'am." As he rose to hang the frame, Ethan and Chloe just stood there pale, motionless, speechless. The sound of the hammer tapping against the nail echoed through the room like punctuation. When it was done, I looked at my children one last time. "Dinner's over," I said quietly. "And so is your inheritance." I turned away before they could answer. Behind me, chairs scraped, footsteps faltered, and the front door clicked shut. For the first time in years, the house felt peaceful. Empty but peaceful. I sipped the last of my tea, now gone cold, and whispered to the quiet. Balance achieved. The next morning, the world looked ordinary again, almost insultingly so. Sunlight spilled through the curtains like nothing had happened. The neighborhood kids biked past, laughing, somewhere down the street. The world looked ordinary again, almost insultingly so. It was strange how peace could follow destruction so quietly. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, staring at the neat stack of folders in front of me. Ethan's debts. The next morning, every reckless purchase and forgotten repayment, all itemized and accounted for. Calvin's final report lay on top, marked confidential in red. The next morning, Anika Shaw arrived just after 10. Heavier. Calvin's final report lay on top. The next morning, "It's done," she said. "All accounts transferred. All filings secured. Red Harbor Trust is untouchable." I nodded. "And the other arrangements?" "Red Harbor Trust is untouchable." The next morning, "You're now the legal creditor for your children's outstanding debts. Every cent they owe now belongs to you." Perfect. "Every cent they owe now belongs to you." Taking a slow sip, I murmured, "I'll give them 30 days. "Yes," I said evenly. "To make their first payment or start earning it another way?" Anika raised an eyebrow. "You're serious about the volunteer clause?" "Completely," I said evenly. Measured voice. She repeated what we drafted. 200 documented hours of community service. Financial counseling. She repeated what we drafted. Completion equals debt forgiveness. I smiled. It's generous. Completion equals debt forgiveness. The kind of mercy they never offered me. Anika studied me for a long moment. 12 months of clean budgeting. "You're not punishing them, Marjorie," then said softly. "Maybe," I said. "But lessons cost something." After she left, I walked to the mantel and looked up at the framed ticket. Beneath it hung a small brass plate I'd had engraved the night before. Maybe. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. It was Liam, holding a brown paper bag and a bright grin. "Brought you some cinnamon rolls from the diner." The value of a choice. "Mr. Dorsey says you're famous now." I laughed. Famous. For what? For being the woman who proved family isn't about blood. He said simply. I reached out and squeezed his hand. "Grandma." "Liam. Money disappears. You remember that." He nodded. "I will. Integrity doesn't." The autumn wind carried the smell of salt from the harbor. I stood there, the cool air brushing my face, and smiled to myself. They thought the game was over. As he left, if you've ever been betrayed by the people you loved most, you know that silence can be louder than any scream. I used to think family meant unconditional love. Now I know it means accountability. I'm Marjorie Elwood, and this was my story. but maybe it's yours too. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. Because this story isn't over, not for me, and maybe not for you either. Sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's order, patience, and the quiet satisfaction of watching the scales finally balance.